Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And today's episode is the last one of the year. So I just wanted to thank everyone who's listened and downloaded an episode throughout the year. There's been 49 episodes this year, which is pretty crazy to look back on. I don't know, doing it week by week makes it feel like it's not as much work as what it would seem like putting out an episode a week. But the biggest thanks would have to go to the guests that come on and giving up their time to be a guest on their podcast. So I can't thank them enough, as I say at the end of every episode, but I really do mean it. I'm appreciative of their time. And a lot of the hardest part about the podcast is getting guests to come on. I've had people organise an appointment, so I've got the meeting all ready to go, booked for 4:00. I'm there on the Zoom ready to go, and they just don't show up and don't let me know. And I've had other people say, yeah, I'll come on, and then they just ghost me. So we're very appreciative of the ones who say that they'll come on, and they do come on and then provide heaps of value for everyone. So thank you to all of the guests I've had come on this year and last year. We'll probably be back, I reckon, this 16th or 23rd of January. So it'll be about 4 weeks off, 3 or 4 weeks. But I'll be going to at least 100 episodes so I can get to the 3 figures. Who knows how much longer to go from there. But for today's episode, I'm talking with Phil Withers from Phillip Withers Landscape Design. Phil's a designer based in Melbourne and he's got a fair old sized crew, does a bit of horticultural installation as well. I've been lucky enough to build a couple of Phil's gardens, and it was one of his gardens, might have been the first one that we did for him, when I realised how much of an impact someone with good plant knowledge makes on a good design, and how much a real designer is good at what they do. So we were building a job. It's pretty cool hardscape construction in there. And it was looking good. But then when he rocked up with the plants and placed them all out, it just blew my mind how amazing it looked. And it's been a pretty popular Instagram post every time I post it because it looks just awesome. And that was as soon as the plants went in, so they didn't even need to mature or anything. They just looked good from the start. So certainly good with his plants and design. And it was fascinating to hear that he started out in fashion as well. So again, it's something, I've known him for a little while and had no idea about that. So it's cool finding out these stories within the chats. And something I loved talking to him about was how he respects the land that he works on. So he's and he mentions why that is. And so he talks about, everyone can do not everyone, but designers can come up with a good design that looks okay, but doing something that actually helps the situation that it's in, whether that's through regeneration or bringing plants or bugs back in to an area where they weren't, within a good design is what is sort of next level stuff. So it was interesting to hear that his thought on that. And he mentioned something that I'm pretty big on as well, in that people do their best work when they're doing something they're passionate about. So that's whether that's someone you employ or what you're doing yourself. If you do something you enjoy, you usually do it well. So it's good to find what you enjoy, whether that's the entirety of landscaping or one particular element of it. And he also mentions in this chat that he's going to be doing hoping to do a Mifkas garden in 2024 with the launch of a book as well. So it's a pretty cool announcement, something to look forward to. So there's plenty of good bits of advice in this chat with Phil. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Phil with us. Phil, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Thanks for having me, Joel. Appreciate coming on board. So how did I start? I didn't plan to get into landscape, to be honest. Definitely planned to get into design. And it was actually early on when I sort of finished school, knew I wanted to do something creative. And I was sort of looking through different courses and the like, and there was a couple that came up. I was almost going to, at the crossroads between illustration and fashion design. So I ended up going down the route of fashion design. And I went into a university and went into a diploma at RMIT and studied screen print design, as it was sort of called. And I thought I was going to come up with, a whole brand around T-shirts and jumpers and all the rest of it. And there was a fair few of us in the course, and we're really entrepreneurial, and definitely did a bit of that. Came out of it sort of 2 years later and made a bit of a brand in that. In fashion and those sort of things. And I suppose young and naive, I suppose I knew I was entrepreneurial, but I think at that particular stage had no understanding of business and the like, and sort of did that for a little while and then realized, I've got to travel for a little while, went away and overseas and the like. and then came back and thought, okay, I've got no money. I've got to get into a job. I went actually and did some work up in the Mount Dandenongs with a good friend doing garden maintenance. And ever since I jumped in the garden, I'm like, oh, of course I'm going to do something about this. This is, love nature, love design. And I just want to learn about everything to do with this and study something to do with it. So I then went and studied landscape design at Swinburne. So it was actually sustainable landscape design was the course that I ended up getting into, because I thought it, I just responded well to it. At that particular time, they had a landscape design course and they had a sustainable landscape design course. So it really resonated with myself, and jumped into that and studied for a little while, and then started to look for some work and went and worked for a landscape designer by the name of Darren McLeod. So he's called Landscapes by Design. He's actually an arborist and a landscape designer, and worked with him for quite some time, a few years. And he taught me everything to do with Vectorworks and how it all sort of worked, and getting out onto sites. And yeah, learn a hell of a lot from him, and still do. Talk to him here and there, especially he does all our arborist stuff and the like still. So yeah, got into that. And then what else? I probably went out and got on the tools with a couple of different companies throughout as well. People like Brian Rankin, worked with him for a little bit, got out on the tools just to sort of learn, what is paving, what is, a retaining wall, really wanted to understand it. Did a bit of garden maintenance, felt like it was really important to get outside and get on the tools for a little while. Spent a bit of time working with guys, like Marty Semkin, and, learned a bit from them early on. I actually knew Brent Reed, so Candio through basketball, and through my dad, has been in basketball for years and years. So have I, so has Brent. So yeah, sort of spoke to him a lot early on, as a bit of a mentor to sort of learn a fair bit. And he obviously had a big connection with Marty and Semkin. And so, there was a natural connection there. And I think it was when I first actually, through Swinburne and doing a little bit of work, as I said, through Dale, there was an opportunity that came up at Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show to do one of the achievable gardens. So I jumped in and actually did an achievable garden. And then I think I jumped into a competition the next year to do back then it was the Landscape Victoria competition for students, before it became what is it called now?
Boutique gardens.
Boutique gardens, yeah. So we did it then, and got a garden there, and sort of thought that was maybe a good time to really, all right, I really want to do some of this for myself in terms of landscape design. And spoke to Marty, spoke to Brent, and ended up jumping in the studio out at Garden World. So that would have been about 10 years ago now. So yeah, then started a little company at that particular stage. But it was interesting. So back then, that sort of competition 10 years ago, when it was the Landscape Victoria or boutique gardens, at that particular point, I think, who else was actually doing it? I think there was a couple of I'm trying to think who was.
Yeah, we did one so we did one in 2011 and 2012. So the 2011 was Christine Galea. I don't know if she's still going anymore.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it's the other way around. And then Ross Ubergang.
Yeah, Ross. So that was who I had a complete mind blank then. He actually won it that year. So we did one together, and he was at Swinburne as well. And he did this beautiful garden. And, I tried to do a bit of a garden too. And it was just, we had a great time. And what it's like. It was just that entrance to the, getting into the industry, meeting everyone, doing those couple of gardens, even the achievable garden in the same way. Probably not so much in the same context, got up and did the boutique, really started to meet people. But that was a real big key to starting, the company back in the day. Realistically, it was just me back then, but it was just such a great entrance to the industry, meeting everyone, learning a bit about it, meeting some people who, really knew what they were doing, like Semkin, like Brent, and a whole host of others, and just then going, I can't wait to keep doing this. Yeah. So early on, actually, I think it was probably a year later, got the first employee. First employee was actually Emily Bowman. So
yeah, she mentioned that.
There's been a couple over the years that we've had, actually. So Em was obviously brilliant. She's gone off and done her own thing, as we all know, doing great stuff. Who else actually worked with us? So anyone else who's jumped off and done their own thing? Benny Hutchinson, he worked with us for a little bit, so he's jumped off and done his own thing as well. And then, I mean, the team we've got now, they're all brilliant. It's great.
So when you went overseas early on and came back after you were had your fashion business, did you have any interest in getting back into it again, or was that any type of work you were trying to get? Was it fashion related?
Well, I probably got this because I went overseas for a little while, did one of those, got the backpack, went and traveled, and probably thinking, oh, what am I actually going to do? I think as much as I was doing a fair bit of that, I think I wasn't quite sure if this was, the be all and end all. I don't think there was an absolute, I think I knew I needed to get a little bit more behind me, possibly. I can't really remember, to be honest, but yeah, no inclination, and definitely didn't jump back into anything. I kept my little screen print machine, and I still printed a few T-shirts here and there back in the day, but yeah, lost it after a couple of years. I think, like I said, once I got into the garden, yeah, I was so inspired, and just, yeah, I think realistically, the big thing was plants. I just wanted to learn everything about them, just wanted to know them all. And obviously that creativity side of it, place some plants one next to the other, all different shapes. I'm like, wow, why don't more people love this? Like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It really is art, isn't it? Like, you get to paint with plants and different textures and materials.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. It's living art. And if you can really start to sort of go, all right, well, this is our canvas. We get out in the garden. If we start to really learn more and more about all these different plants, shapes and sizes, you can play with all the textures, the colors. And when you really do have a good crack and get into it, it's amazing, isn't it? And there's so many people all around the world, like, and so many that we work with in and around Victoria, around Australia and the like. It's just amazing what can be done with the different types of gardens. I think also, as time's got on, more and more probably starting to go, okay, want to learn more about the Australian landscape as well. Still not afraid to use all different types of exotics and edibles, but really trying to find that connection and regeneration of our Australian landscape. So I think there's something in that, like, that we're sort of really underpins our work. And every time we go out to a garden, the first thing we're thinking about with our plant palettes is, all right, where is the site? Like, and how do we find out? We look at all the EVCs for that particular site. So these are the plants that grew here pre-European settlement, and that's our plant list to start with. And it's like, all right, well, let's use some of them, because then we can attract some of the birds and get this sort of, get the natural aspect back into this particular site. And then we start to think about what's the palette that obviously the client's got their brief. Do they want food? Do they want color? Do they want texture? Do they want big trees? And start to blend it in. That's sort of how we sort of consider it. And it's, but definitely it's an art form.
Yeah. And it's interesting that the two people you mentioned who work for you both have a similar style. They're both very conscious of indigenous plants and the natural environment. So do you just attract those type of people because that's what you like doing as well?
I think so. It is. It's like, sometimes think some of these guys, like, they're so, people that like plants really like plants. And there's two that you've mentioned, Michaela Hamilton, she's one of the she's our lead horticulturist as well, and they just absolutely thrive on it. So we all come to the same sort of realization. They come and hopefully they learn something from us and go off and do their own thing. But I think we're all tarred with the same brush at the end of the day. And there's a connection behind it all. Hopefully we're, designing and creating landscapes with a bit of substance. And I know those guys in particular, they really hold their hat up, and try and make sure they're putting, something on the ground for the environment.
Yeah, I'm just dipping my toe into it at the moment. Like, I'm trying to get Impacris Impressa for the garden show.
Nice.
It's the state floral emblem, and they're sort of pushing the state floral emblem in some of their advertising. But geez, it's hard to get one.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's a tricky one to grow, and it's funny because it sort of grows all over Victoria. But trying to find one, that's something that's really important to note. To be honest, it's like, as for landscapes in general across the country, in Victoria and the like, there's such a fascination. I mean, we're European settlers at the end of the day, but people think of a garden and what do they think of? They probably think of more of a European, English, sometimes an Asian style garden. That's the plants that we have in our market. And you think there's some sort of consideration to, here's a garden that can possibly be manicured and the like. And there's parts of that that's wonderful, the edible content, to cut a flower, all those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, an Australian garden, should probably have some Australian plants.
There's just a couple.
Even when we go out at summertime, we go and we wander out to nature. We all have a fascination with an Australian, natural environment, but I don't think we affiliate that so well to our garden, which is quite funny and peculiar when you really think about it. I think that's something that will resonate, and I think it's starting to ring true, but people will, as time goes on, maybe start to think, oh yeah, that native bushland, that could be in my garden. That's a garden.
Yeah. And just about every person's after a low maintenance garden as well. So they're the ideal plants for it.
Yeah, exactly right. So, and I'm not a purist. I don't think we don't need to be, but at the end of the day, having some of that and, employing a little bit of habitat in the garden, feeding the birds and doing all these things that can really maybe send a cultural message and get some of that connection back into their landscape so that people tell that story to their kids and the like. It's an important thing.
Yeah, and a lot of the times when I ask people how they started in the industry, they'll mention like their mum or their grandma or something about in the garden. So, getting their kids, getting young people in there is a great way to keep it going and get more people involved in it.
Absolutely.
But going back to when you said you worked for Brian Rankin, I love that. I love when designers work in construction so they get a bit more of an idea about what they're designing. So how did that come about? How did you get work for Brian?
Well, I think, to be honest, like I was up working with Daryl and, as we talked about a little bit earlier, design can ebb and flow and you need to sort of, work hard to get that consistency. And there was a little point where Daryl sort of said to me, all right, I don't have heaps right now. So if you want to jump out, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to jump out. I'll just go and get on the tools for a little while. I need to learn a little bit, more in regards to the landscape. So it was just a couple of phone calls and there was a contact to Brian, and it was actually another particular landscaper who's a little bit smaller, Diligent Landscapes. So Gary Winter, who I did a little bit of work for in the same right. So I called a couple and just was jumping in and doing some labouring. And then, to be honest, Brian had a little bit of work where he was like, all right, jump out and do some garden maintenance here and then jump out on site and learn some construction here. And I was all for it. Just learn as much as I could, actually be out on site, get a feel for it. So, when it did come to these times where I'm out on site, learning to design and trying to put a design together, I knew what was going on to a degree anyway, because I feel like there's a hell of a lot more to learn.
Yeah. But still, knowing something is a lot better than nothing at all.
Yeah.
I love that idea. And I don't think it happens enough. And it can also start a good relationship between a designer and a construction team. So then when the designer's built up, more of a reputation, they're getting more work, then they can get that construction team to build it and the construction guys can get that designer to design it. So it's a big circle.
Dead right. And you're right too, in that, that affiliation, maybe there is something in that, early on where I'm not sure exactly how it could work, but whether, you are sort of setting your team up so that they get outside for a couple of weeks a year or similar. Maybe there's something that could happen through Landscape Victoria. Put another thing on their plate, maybe. Probably enough.
Yeah, something I find would happen a lot would be the design companies get too busy to do that. Like, so you need to, there's one thing to get them well-rounded, but you also got to you've got to get their wage paid for, so you need to be getting the designs done. So that's probably the priority.
Yeah.
But it's not a bad thing to keep in mind.
And there's probably enough there to learn too. Like, even I know now, and a lot of the people sort of we look to hire, and they're coming out, whether it be a landscape architecture course or a landscape design course, and a lot of them are very visionary, especially the landscape architects, to be honest, because they'll learn that through the RMITs and the Melbourne courses, whereas more the landscape design is probably a little bit more practical. But you definitely, even from a landscape or design perspective, they come into the studio, they're fresh. They don't understand. They might understand a little bit about, how levels work on a survey, but they really don't understand how to put it together in terms of, all right, how do I break this down? How does that work in construction? How do I, learn more about, they won't understand a lot of the plants and how they work in terms of different aspects and all these different things. Well, probably don't know too many plants, to be honest. So there's a lot of that practical stuff, even just jumping into a design before they even get out on site, that they really need to learn and probably, understand why some of these courses teach people how to think before they do to get some of that practical side. But yeah, there's so much to learn before they even jump out on site, and then they need to get out on site and see how it gets done. So it's a really interesting one. Yeah.
So what sort of breakdown do you have of team members who are landscape designers compared to landscape architects?
Well, right now we've got 8 in our team. We've got 5 designers, 2 horticulturists, and then Jared, who's more running sort of business management contract. And so out of our 5 designers, we've got 4 landscape architects and 1 landscape designer. So yeah, so realistically, there's only actually 1, and she's sort of come into it more from a graphic background. And yeah, so as much as I didn't study landscape architecture, I actually went back and got registered. So I did it through AILA and did an 18-month course to get a senior registration. So you can do it that way. But yeah, so Bree's our only landscape designer who sort of came in from a different design background and probably more learn in the studio. But it's interesting, even coming from that side of it, like she's come from a graphics background, and it just, incredible eye. It's a bit like what was talking about with when they come out of a Melbourne or an RMIT course studying landscape architecture. It's amazing how well they teach these students how to think. And, that's creativity, and that's really hard to teach. I don't know if some people can't really learn it, but if you're going to have a crack, like go into one of those types of courses, because that'll really give you a chance to open you up and go, how do I think about this from an actual design perspective, learning some of the fundamentals. How does color work? How does space in terms of mass and void and all these other little things that are really important to learn from a design perspective before you even go out and start to work out what are the plants, what are the materials, all those sorts of things. Like there's an art to design. You can learn it, but you've got to be passionate about it,
Yeah, 100%. And the reason I ask about the design and landscape architect difference is what I was going to ask, what was the difference in terms of plant knowledge for the landscape architects? But I imagine if she's come from design, it's not going to have much either from the graphic side of things.
Yeah. Mainly, I know the diplomas say, down here, like the Swinburnes and what else? Probably right up in, and obviously Burnley down here. That's where you learn your plant knowledge, probably much more so you can tell from some of the, the architecture courses or landscape architecture courses for sure.
Yep. Yeah, so there's none of the ones who you employ have done much plants when they're studying?
Not of the team currently. No, they've actually all come out and they're, more landscape architects, and they're, really quite good on, they do come out and they're good on programs, and they do understand the fundamentals of drawing and the like. But plant knowledge, need to learn it.
It's where the London College of Garden Design is good.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. That's probably a more well-rounded course. Brent can vouch for that. And then they got Andrew Fisher-Tomlin over there. So they'd be definitely all over it.
Yeah, like if I was going to do a course, I reckon that's the one I'd do. It does seem, because they do the construction side of things as well. Like they get people thinking about construction. So, it seems like it'll be well-rounded, like you said.
Well, that's true too. And I think, they're pushing so much to get those, key people from the industry with the experience, like the Steve Taylors, like the Bethany's, that it just, they're brewing in the industry, aren't they? So if you're going to get taught by them, and obviously Brent, yeah, you can't get much better insight than to be able to see those people that are at the top of the game and learning all their insights. As you're walking through, they're going to come out and they're going to be so well rounded.
Mm. And something with your designs I've seen is that you're, and going back to the Indigenous side of things, you're also respectful of the land that the gardens are getting built on. Is that something that, did that come about for any reason, or what was any particular reason, or is that just something you just started thinking of?
I think it's, more and more like I think as we create gardens, we're touching on landscape. And I think that especially during COVID and the like, and even just as the more sort of gardens we start to do, you start to realize, okay, well, this was filled with a whole lot of vegetation and nature pre-European settlement and the like. And I think that appreciation for our country and the like, it just, I feel it in myself in terms of, I don't feel like I know enough about, like, culturally about the country. So I feel like in our work, we are touching upon landscape all the time. And we have the opportunity to be able to start to put back with what we're doing each and every garden. And I don't know, for us, like, I feel like we can quite easily make gardens look quite okay. Like it's you learn to do it over time and the like. But if you can start to then have a garden that connects back to that particular landscape and, has a sense of place, has some substance, and we're starting to regenerate, and we're starting to feed the birds, and we're starting to tell a story for the location, we start to learn more and more. And, we have the opportunity to give that information back to our clients as we start to touch upon land. So if I can learn more and more and feed that back into our work, and if our team can as well, we really thrive on that. And I wouldn't say that we know a whole heap, but we're learning more and more and more. We know a bit when it comes to plants and a bit when it comes to the actual landscape. But as time goes on, we're starting to take on more of that. And I feel like it's partly our duty to pay respect to that and put that into these gardens and, feed that in, as we talked about before, to tell that story to the kids tomorrow. I'd love to be able to tell my daughter that. And if that's one thing that we can bring out and learn as we, build more and more landscape, or design more and more landscape as well, and work as, with a good team, that's something can hold on to. And love to be able to, do that into the future.
Yeah, it's an awesome idea, and I love that you do that with your designs. And it's good for the clients as well to see that you actually care about what you're doing. So with your designs, have you put like a focused idea on how the brand comes across? Because at the end of each, like what I've seen recently on your designs, like the last page just says "On Your Legends," which is one of your classic sayings. So have you put like a bit of yourself in there as well?
We have definitely tried to. I think part of like, obviously we design, we have horticulture, and we source plants, and we place them all out, and we do all that. But behind all that, there's a business, and we need to understand how that works. So we work really hard to try and make sure we have all these other things happening within our four walls and within our week, within our month. Setting budgets, setting targets, thinking about our marketing. We have a day set out for that. We have a person and roles that do all different things to make those sort of cogs turn. So as we sort of, work through, we're also thinking about, all right, well, how are we being perceived? How are we getting work? We have a brand. How is that working day to day? So we've always looked to sort of talk to key people, whether it be graphics, whether it be marketing people. And there was a time when we were thinking, a few years ago, we sat down and worked with a great graphic designer who also does branding and the like. And they actually sat down and helped us with our brand. And, we've been doing it for a good 5 years at that particular stage. And then we worked on the website, and we worked on, all right, how do we bring the people through? We really care about our people. We want to be able to tell, our staff, our team, we try to take it quite lighthearted, but then at the same point in time, we like to think that we know what we're talking about as well. So those two things, we try to make them resonate through our brand. And working with a really creative person at the time, we were able to hopefully bring that through with some of the text in our proposals or in our plans, and as you sort of said, and on the website, and then it all feeds through and into social media and the like. So yeah, it was really important for us to do that. And we try to make sure that we're very strategic in terms of, as I said, each week we think about what we're doing on social media. We think about how that connects back to whether it's in our sign off on our emails, what we're putting through to blogs on the website. It all needs to happen. And the reason why we do it is because the business needs to stay current. We need to be able to feed our team, to be able to get more work, to be able to make sure that when we have our weekly check-in, all right, we've checked all those things off. When we have our monthly check-in, when we go through with the accountant or bookkeeper and the like, we're sitting down and we're going through budgets. All right, this is what we need to do for this month. This is what we need to tick off, and how do we get to that? Because if we don't, well, then we don't have enough for next month. And we have a series of targets that we're always trying to tick, and that's part of business. And if we don't do that, well, we don't move forward, and we don't get the opportunities and things like that.
Did you enjoy that side of things, that side of the business? Or is that just something you have to do so that you can do the enjoyable creative stuff?
I think I definitely do enjoy it. I think, even back when I said, we're talking about, the clothes and the like, I knew there was an entrepreneurial part of me that, liked trying to work things out. That's same as design in a little bit. Like most of it, I have to be creative or else I get a bit bored. But then there's a part of me that loves working things out and, having a strategy behind the business. And we obviously have a great team of people. It's definitely not just me, because to try and make sure some of those things work in terms of get done, that's probably not me. But yeah, I definitely love trying to sort of piece it all together. How do we do this? How do we make this work better? How do we sort of sit down and work through the marketing to sort of maybe get this across, because that's good for our business and things like that. But we spend a good amount of time and make sure we have those series of meetings, as I was saying before, whether they be the weekly meeting to sit down and work through schedules, or whether we sit down and work through what's happening in terms of forecasting. And then, as I said, the monthly sort of check-ins just to work out, all right, well, what are we working on this month to sort of make sure we've got, things happening for the next month, and all the rest of it. So it's important to be in and work hard on the designs to make sure they all get done, and we all work together on that. But it's also just as important to spend enough time on business, or else where are you going? And you need to have these plans set in place. Like we like to think we know where we're going with our brand. We like to think we know, what we're doing in terms of some things set up for the future, in terms of, opportunities, making sure it's fun, but definitely making sure we're improving that bottom line and making some money as a business.
Yeah. Have you ever had a business coach, or do you just use like the specialists, like the accountant and the marketing person that you spoke to?
I've never had a coach. I've always had mentors, and I definitely work with lots of consultants, good consultants, and happy to pay good money for good consultants to make sure we get what we need. We've got a great accountant. We've got a great bookkeeper. We've worked with great graphic designers and the like, and branding strategists, and even PR people when we've done shows and the like, to ensure that we get that right strategy behind what we're doing, so we can get to where we need to go in the right amount of time. We've only got when you want to start to sort of work in the types of jobs that you want to be doing, plan to become what you plan to become. We've always pushed towards, we start telling that story, then we'll start doing it. And as I said, like if we aren't, especially as a team, if we aren't working on gardens that have a bit of substance behind it, they're not really the briefs for us, and we get a little bit bored, and it's just, we can't do those jobs well unless we're passionate about it. People do the best work with things that they're passionate about. That's when it all shines through. I always say, even when you're picking people to work with you within your business, always just looking for, that candidate that is passionate. You can't beat passion. Some people will always be good at what they're passionate about. It all comes from attitude. And if someone's got their attitude sort of set up, it's like, I really want to work in a design business that's focused on, I don't know, nature or plants, a bit like we are. If they email you and they're wanting a job to work with you and they've studied, I mean, that's hands down, they're probably going to be the ones you're going to end up hiring, because they're going to show that they're going to, put everything into it. You can teach the skill, but you can't teach passion.
Yeah. Yeah, that couldn't agree with that statement anymore. Yeah, passion. And like you said, if you're passionate about something, you're usually pretty good at it. Did you have to ever knock back clients because the project they're wanting done isn't in your wheelhouse?
I always like I like to think we're pretty versatile. People do come to us and they say, "Oh, I want a really formal garden," and say, "You sure you got the right person?" But I love to have a conversation about it and work it out. And then, there has definitely been jobs where I've just sort of said, maybe you should speak to this person. Maybe you should speak to this person. And this is what we do, and this is what we cost, and this is how we do it. And we like to think that this is what we'll push towards. And if this doesn't resonate, make sure that you're working with someone you're comfortable with. So definitely give them the advice to sort of talk to others at least. So yeah, I've probably pushed people away without directly saying go away, sort of thing.
I'm sure they'd appreciate that.
Oh, it's good to have a conversation normally.
Yeah.
Help them out.
And going back to the branding again, something I've noticed is, I don't know if it's all of them, but most of your photos on Instagram are all professionally taken as well. So is that something that is a conscious thing to do to keep that looking professional?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, part of that branding and the like. I think, again, like there's a team of us that look at it, and it's sort of, as time has gone on, it's been, we've felt it's important to keep a consistency to the photos, and even thinking about what we need next on the feed can sometimes be considered. So it's probably about having, graphic designers within the team as well that can really sort of see some of that stuff even better than I can, to be honest. But yeah, definitely always thinking about keeping that brand and how it sort of resonates through. Yeah, we may not do that forever, but for right now, it seems to feed us work and work well in terms of, telling the story we're trying to portray. And again, just making sure that we're telling people what type of work that we want, which is really important. Sometimes we have done some things on social media or other things, and you end up with going, are we portraying that we want to be doing, more of this sort of stuff? So you have to be conscious. I think it's one of those things too. I mean, a couple of the sort of things in regards to, I don't know, what we're leading sort of more towards in terms of, as we were talking about before, with that natural approach, and how it's really starting to resonate for us in terms of picking up on an Australian sort of a garden is something we're really sort of focusing more and more on. It's really interesting as you go through. We haven't been doing it for a long, long time, but had the business for about 10 years. And at the start, you're just starting to create gardens, but then you really start to build up some philosophies. One of the things actually really enjoyed, it was through COVID, actually got asked. So from a book company, it's like, all right, do you want to think about writing down some stuff for a book? And I said, well, I don't think we have enough work to do a book, to be honest. And they're like, oh, well, maybe just talk more about the principles and things like that. And I thought, oh, yeah, maybe we could do it in that regard, and sort of talked about it more. And we put a few things together. And I thought this would actually be really good. This would be a great thing for us to do as a guide for ourselves, to be able to sit down and think about, what's the philosophy behind our work? Why are we doing this? In terms of, why do we think about using those types of materials? Why do we think about using those types of plants? And have a guide that we can use as a bit of a handbook for ourselves. And then hopefully we can, once we've sort of created that, we can pass that out to the public and maybe they could take something out of that. So that was a really interesting sort of COVID project, and something that will be, looking, it's actually going to come out sort of late next year. And hopefully if we do a Memphis garden, possibly the year after, it'll be something we can tie into that. So that's definitely a couple of things that we're really excited about and been really good for us as a team, because it's definitely not just me that's put a lot of work into that. We've actually been working with A.B. Bishop, who's an amazing writer, and she's been helping co-write that and put some of her sort of amazing philosophy in there, her understanding of nature and plants and all those sorts of things on top of that. So it's been really exciting to build some of that up with the team, with AB, and hopefully be able to build on that. So we have some real good underpinning to what we're doing and build that into possibly a garden in 2024. So that's something we're pretty excited about moving forward as well.
It sounds exciting.
Oh, it's fun. That's why you keep it fun, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Was the last main garden you did at the garden show the I See Wild, apart from the welcome garden?
We did the welcome garden, with yourself and a couple of others. That was brilliant. That was in 2018. So 2017, I See Wild, that was the last show garden we did. The only other garden we've done in a show garden sense was the one during COVID. So in 2020, so last year, and that was over in China in the Shanghai Garden Show, or Shanghai Expo. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go over. So that was a really interesting experience, to be honest. I've spent a hell of a lot of time on conference calls trying to help, work out and place out plants, with this incredible Chinese contractor who did an absolutely astonishing job of putting it together, considering we weren't there to help. And I don't know, they did an unbelievable job. So
did they leave it there for a while?
It's still there.
All right.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was sort of the transition of how a show during COVID and the like, but so they had a handful. So I don't know if it was a dozen or a few more, I can't remember, international gardens sort of that they placed out for this very large show. It was like 4 times a standard sort of show garden that we're used to. But they basically had all these gardens created, and they took months to make them. So completely different, again, to what we're used to, the 10 days at Memphis. And then at the end of the show, they said, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to pick 3 and leave them here. And so ours got left there. And I think it was, as I said, credit to the Chinese team on the ground for how well they put this together, because it looked brilliant. They did a good job of, the craftsmanship and the work, and even like right down to the curating, because we weren't there to pick the plants. Like, we obviously had a plant list and we were talking to them, consistently to try and get this to the best it could be. But a hell of a lot of work went in their side to make sure it was done to the nth degree, and they did an amazing job.
You get any Australian natives in there?
No, it was actually, we tried to flip it on its head and think, well, we're talking local, that's our philosophy a lot in terms of, as I said, start with all the local plants that are on the site pre sort of any sort of development and the like. Well, we thought, well, if we're in China, we need to think about China plants. We may as well use this as an opportunity to learn. So we thought, well, let's learn about all the materials from that province. Let's all that area. So we used a lot of granite, a little bit of bluestones, Chinese bluestone, and then a whole heap of different plant material from China and some of the local plants and the like. And we worked with some of their horticulturists to ensure that we could get a lot of the stock and all those sort of things. We're actually able to go over early on and pick some trees before it all sort of, because it was, much earlier in the piece. But other than that, it was just, working across the computer. So, you can do a lot more of that these days. It was, an exciting one, but it would have been much more exciting to be there.
Pretty crazy experience. So what was do you get much work from being at garden shows?
Well, we get a lot, we definitely get a lot of inquiries. They don't turn into work straight away. I find that if you do a couple of garden shows. I reckon consistency is good, and I think there'd be, definitely some companies out there, like Semken and the like, that would definitely be able to talk to that. But you do a few garden shows and people end up coming, and you get a few inquiries. I don't think they come straight away, but over time, I think it builds brand, and then you start to get a few inquiries trickle through, and sometimes they turn into jobs. But it's interesting because I find like you end up getting a call. It's like, oh, yeah, we saw your garden in 2017. It's like, well, it's 2020. So. And then you end up going out to, a rural job, and it might be, I can think of quite a handful of jobs that have come in that regard. So I think you do end up getting work from it, but it takes its time.
Mm. Do you track where your work comes from? Like what's the main source of where you get new jobs?
Referrals. Yeah. So from architects and the like, definitely important to build up those relationships with all the different consultants. Yeah, over time, we've built up more and more of those relationships and that consistency of work. So yeah, we track it. We try to track all our leads coming in terms of, knowing how many leads we got coming in per month. We do try and make sure we say exactly where each lead's coming from and those sort of things, so we can really track all of that stuff. We go in and out of making sure we've got it documented, but we're really, we put an emphasis on it again to sort of make sure we definitely always track it, but just making sure where those leads come from and things like that. But sort of, talking to a few of those sort of, as I said, mentors over the years, in different sort of consistencies. But there's a few, like I think, that I've learned a fair bit from, like the Andrew Laidlaws and other ones, sort of obviously Marty and Brand, who I've mentioned before, but I've chatted to Dean Barker quite a few times, and he's one of those, and they have a brilliant business, in terms of not just creating landscape, obviously to design and build gardens and maintain them, but spoken to him on countless occasions, and he tracks everything, and understands exactly what his business is about, or they understand what their business is about. How many leads, how much of this per month, and it's definitely learned a lot by listening to people like him. And it's like, that's how you make sure that you're underpinning your business, by going, okay, well, we got 18 leads last month. That's a great month. How do we make sure we do that in June, or those sort of things? So it's, starting to build up. The more information you can harvest, the more you can use it.
Yeah, because you don't want to just run along making money thinking, oh, this is going well, but not really understanding why it's going well, because then if something changes, then you need to work out why that's changed and how to fix it.
Yeah, exactly right. And where do you want to lead? Like, if you don't have that information to sort of sift through, to sort of go, okay, well, I can understand we did this, this, and this, but what do we want to do in the future? How do we take that information and start to sort of, we know we get all these leads from these few architects here. Do we need a couple more? Like, who do we want to talk to? Let's set up some things so that we're doing that. Let's go and have a coffee with a couple of architects that we really like. Let's send them an email. Okay, let's jump on the phone. Those sort of things. It's really important that we all stay current, and we sort of make sure that we're, again, stepping out of our shoes as, not just designers at the end of the day. We're running a business, and we need to make sure that we're doing the things that are going to get us the work that is going to work for us.
Yeah, and the work that you want, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got any goals, like 5-year goals or anything that you're wanting to set the business towards?
I think, like, as much as I suppose there's a couple, like, definitely have some targets in mind in terms of making sure that we're growing as a business, and in terms of making some profit and things like that. Definitely have, as we move forward, some things in mind so that we're underpinning our work for a little bit more environmental. But like, there's definitely some things to make sure that we're thinking about our team and, culturally, how we're making sure, like, I feel like we've got our culture is getting better and better within the 4 walls. And I know that by, our team, they love it. They love what they do. So great people attract great people. That's important. And they all enjoy being around each other. So, that's something we're really focused on. And I think one big thing for myself, like as well, and important for the team to do too, is just to make sure, and push towards the balance. I'm in my late 30s, so starting to really need to focus on, we've got the family now and things like that. And it's important for our staff to be thinking of it too, but making sure I love what I do. So sometimes find that I can do it way too much. So I really need to focus and balance. So just making sure those things are in place, those little checks, as we lead into the 40s, want to really sort of push to make sure, whether it be a Wednesday morning off to go and play golf or a surf or those sort of things, really want to get those things set in place. That's a real big target sort of moving forward into probably the next sort of 5 years. I feel like we have a good balance in terms of knowing what we're doing with our business and our work and tracking and making sure we're hitting some targets. But what are we doing in the future to making sure we're building on lifestyle? Because it's not all about those work things as much as we love it.
Yeah, those things all help your creativity as well.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Reset your brain.
Yeah. If you can have those, sometimes, especially the working from home thing, like I come down to Melbourne a couple of days and I feel like I'm here every second day and working from home the other days. And it's great to be able to work from home. You can have that time, especially in design and that, to actually be creative and get some of those sketch plans out and things like that. Go out to a site visit rule and all those other things, but making sure that when you are working hard, you've got to stop. If I can stop in the middle of the day and go for a run when you're working from home, or I feel blessed maybe the role that I have, you can sometimes do those sort of things, but it is really important to take the opportunity as well. That balance is something really striving for. Can find you're passionate, but sometimes you can be too passionate.
Yeah, I reckon there'd be a lot of people who could take that advice as well. And last question for you is, who do you think would be a good guest to have on this podcast?
That's a good one. It's probably a whole plethora. Maybe, I reckon, like maybe someone like are they just, they wouldn't just anything to do with landscape, yeah?
Yeah.
I reckon like maybe a Mike Steele, like a Bamstone, great stories, really interesting in terms of, family business, something that's, true Australian and nice and natural and those sort of things, and just think he'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Oh, Phil, can't thank you enough for coming on. I absolutely love chatting to you whenever I do so. And I reckon a lot of people like hearing your story as well. And I had no idea you're in fashion at the start. So learn something new every day. But thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much, Joel. And good on you for doing what you're doing. It's great I love listening to it and doing a great thing for the industry. And good on you for being passionate and doing what you do.